So I created a little worksheet here, and if we jump ahead here to page 23, when we talk about time, I've got this, what I call the 7-day success plan. And this is kind of a combination of a couple of different time management systems that I've used over the years. One is the idea that I came up with from Mark McCormick's book, What They Didn't Teach You in Harvard Business School, which is a great book I read like 20 years ago. And he had this little system that he'd used for years and years and years for time management. And then there's also then a twist from Dale Carnegie's Winning Friends and Influencing People. And I've used this little worksheet here for years, and it most definitely works. So what you do is you take this worksheet, and obviously it's in the workbook, page 23, so you can just print off copies. If you look at the calendar, the calendar normally starts with Sunday, right? Okay, well, it's my goal to take Sunday off and not work on Sunday. So my work week starts with Monday, and then I go right down through the work week. Okay. Now then, so you take that's down that's the row headings, right? So the column headings are then what are the activities that are going to create success and momentum in Solavei. And I would say these are not necessarily in a prioritized order, although this one certainly is #1 priority, and that is call. And you'll notice this word is call prospects. Okay, so it's not enough to say, okay, so on Monday I'm going to call some people, and I want you to think about how it works when you go to work at your job. For those of you that still work for someone else, whether it's part-time or full-time, how does it work? When do you show up? Just whatever you feel like it, or no? For most people, it's very structured and very set pattern, right? If you're working on Monday, you probably have to be to work at 9 a.m., or maybe it's 8 a.m., or maybe it's 7 a.m., or maybe you work a swing shift and you show up at 4 p.m. or whatever, but you have a set time. And then what do you do when you get to work? You just sit there and, well, I wonder if there's any work going to come my way anytime soon here. No. You usually have set things that you're supposed to do at set time. And when do you take a break? Well, that's probably dictated. And when do you take a lunch? That's probably, again, dictated to you. So what I want you to do is I want you to consider, why would you work harder for someone else than you do for yourself? And I'm not talking about working harder as in the number of hours. If you're working for someone else full-time, I don't expect that you're going to work Solavei full-time. In fact, very few people are working Solavei full-time. It's 30,000 people in the company. I dare say, 28,000 people plus are part-time. But I want you to line out what it is you're going to do and when. And the best way to map this out is in advance. And when I read the book Winning Friends and Influencing People in 1992, Dale Carnegie in that book taught me a simple little system, and I've followed it, and it works. And I didn't question it. I didn't say, well, why not this day or why not that day? He said this is what he'd done, and so I did it. So every Saturday night, he taught me to sit down and map out my week. What is it I'm going to do and when? If you want to be specific, you have to be terrific. So on Monday, when are you going to call prospects? Well, I'm going to show you a little communications log and a little calling sheet here in a second. And so I'm going to say that there are 4 times that you could call prospects on Monday. And so I'm going to break this out. And I'm going to say, I can't write very well with a mouse, so don't mind my writing. 7A to 7:30. 30 minutes. Now that's early. Who can you call at 7 a.m. in the morning? Well, I'll talk about that here in a second. So 7 a.m. to 7:30, so that's 0.5. 0.5 hours, right? And then I'm going to call people from 12:15 to 12:45. Half an hour of my lunch I'm going to spend calling prospects. That's what we call a rainmaking activity. Okay, so that's another 0.5. So you get the concept. I'm going to put some time in here. I'm going to put some time in here. After that's all said and done, I'm going to have a grand total number of hours spent calling prospects on that Monday. Then I go through and I do that for each day of the week, all the way through. Okay. Now, again, my personal goal, I'll do that all the way down through the week. Okay, so my personal goal is to take Sunday off. So Sunday, I don't put anything in there. I leave it blank. I don't cross it out. I'm demonstrating for you that I cross it out, but I leave it blank. So let's say then I have, when I plan this out in advance, if I add up all of these days for this column, I have a number of hours. Guess when I don't get to take Sunday off? When after I total up all the hours at the end of my week, because I remember when I, personally, this is what works for me. When do I do this? When do I fill out this sheet? Saturday night. Saturday nights, I have a total number of hours I've spent doing everything. You know, at this point, I'm only talking about the first column, which is called prospects. So on Saturday night, when I total up, what's my total? How many total hours have I spent in that week calling prospects? And then how does that relate to what my goal was? Guess when I don't get to take Sunday off? When, as we go through all of these activities, when I didn't meet my goals. When I didn't meet my goals, then that's what I got to do on Sunday. And I don't want to do that. I want to take Sunday off. I think it's important to take a day off. For me, it's important to take Sunday off. All right, so that's for the first column, calling prospects. Got a little excited there. So what's the next category? Message prospects. Messaging prospects. What would messaging prospects be? Text messaging, email, maybe Skype messaging if that's how you communicate with that person from your warm list. If you normally Skype with them, then a Skype message. So all of those would fit in. But it's not enough to say, yes, I'm going to message prospects on Monday. No. When? Specifically. And you don't have to break each one of these categories into the quadrant of 4 different times. But I am going to show you, as far as calling on the phone, I'm going to teach you this 4-quadrant call sheet. But you might do it at 2 different times on Monday. Let's say I was doing it from 10 to 10:15 in the morning, and let's say then I was also going to message people. You know, often messaging is a good activity for when it's later, right? So let's say I'm going to message from 9 to 9:30. p.m. Okay, so following up with prospects. Now, following up with prospects, that could be a call, and that could be a message. But I guess what I was trying to demonstrate here is that this is a separate category. This is prospecting. This is step number 1 of our 1, 2, 3 system. And step number 1 is warm them up. Okay? That's what I'm talking about here, is warming people up. Step number 2 is get them to the message. We're going to talk about the 1, 2, 3 system in a bit. Step 3 is follow up. When is that going to happen? Scheduled, specific time. When are you going to do that? Now, just because we have 7 days here, I'm going to abbreviate specific. How's that? Okay, specific. Just because we have 7 days here, maybe you don't work the Solavei business on Tuesday. Maybe Tuesday's not a day because you have this, that, or the other that are already plugged into your Tuesday, and most people's routines are relatively consistent. They're doing the same basic activity. For example, if you play softball, you play softball on Tuesday night, let's say, or you have a book club and you go to book club on Tuesday, or poker, or bowling, or whatever it is, whatever civic activities, maybe city council meetings are on Tuesday, or whatever, church group Tuesday, whatever it is. So in our example here, let's say you don't work on Tuesday, whatever it is. All right. Calling your team. When is it that you're going to call your team members? Touch base with your people. You should be touching your people multiple times a week. By touch meaning, a phone call or a text message or an email or a Skype message or a Twitter direct message or a message in the Solavei community, even, if you want, okay? Now, on that topic of connecting with your team, if someone's brand new, they don't really have much of a team, right? Okay, which is fine. They'll get there. If you're watching this training and you've been in Solavei more than a week, you have a team. If you've been in a week, you should have 3 people, okay? 3 can be a team. So let me go down one page. So we're talking about calling your team and messaging your team, both of those categories. Let's look at the communication plan worksheet, which is page 24. So 24 is the page number, and I could fit 27 people on that page. And as you understand the strategy to be successful in Solavei, one of the first things you want to do is build out 4 trios so that you can earn all your fab. 1 trio a week is our goal. 1 trio a week, 4 weeks, your first month, you've earned your 650 fab bonus. And with 4 trios, then of course you would have 12 people in your first month. And then if you keep that up, and I hope that you will, because you want to create a real nice broad foundation, you have 24 people. And then you'll need another sheet the next month, right? Okay. So what you do is, as you enroll people in Solavei, you put their names on here. Now, a few weeks down the road, a few months down the road, the person, let's say you put, Billy Bob here. I'll just abbreviate it, called Bill, was your first person that you enrolled, and Sally was the second person you enrolled. Down the road, weeks, months, whatever it is, you may change the order of this 1, 2, 3. Maybe Sally's your number 1 producer. Sally's just kicking butt, taking names in Solavei. It doesn't mean that this has to be a chronological order of the people that you signed up. Whatever the order, it doesn't matter. So you put your people here that you're working directly with. You directly sponsor into Solavei. Now, Sally may have someone that, let's say Sally has a Joe, and Sally directly sponsored Joe. But as you're building out your organization, let's say that Joe is someone that you and Sally both work with a fair amount of time. You get to the point where you're actually reaching out and touching base with Joe on a regular basis too. This sheet, this communication plan worksheet, does not have to be specifically your directly enrolled people. Right before this training, I was on the text message and an email with someone who's on my 3rd or 4th level, and we were working together. And so again, this does not have to be just your directly enrolled people, but people that people on your team that you're actively engaged with. So what I do is I then take, change my pen color here, and I divide these columns in 2. myself. And what I do is for the left-hand side, that's me. And for the right-hand side, that's them. And you notice here, what week is this for? I don't do one necessarily every single day, but what week is that for? Okay. Again, I start my weeks with Monday. So Monday, and this will show Monday through Sunday. But I'll have the actual dates, you know, the numerical dates. Okay, so when I say I divide those columns in half, what I do is if I call Bill, I put a tick mark there. Tick. If Bill calls me, I put a tick mark over here. Bill calls me again, tick mark over here. Bill calls me again, tick mark over here. Sally calls me, tick mark over here. I call Sally, I call Sally, I call Sally. You get me? So what I can do as we go through and fill out this form on a weekly basis, I can see at a glance, most of us are very visual, I can see at a glance who I'm communicating with, that's the left-hand column, and who's communicating with me. That's the right-hand column. Text message, I do the same thing with. Email, I do the same thing with. I'm not a big Skype user. I do use Skype. I did put my Skype ID in this document, and so you know I rarely have a lot entered in Skype, but I do have a column there for it. Facebook, meaning Facebook private message, really more than me posting on their wall or them posting on my wall, or certainly not counting up the posts in the private Facebook group that we have for our team, but private Facebook messages. Me, Facebook messaging over here for Bill, over here, Sally, Facebook messaging me. Twitter, there's certain people in my group that we're on Twitter together, and so we'll sometimes Twitter DM, it's called, direct message. Twitter DM. I got one late last night. And then, of course, another column that we could add would be the Solavei community itself. And that's a way, obviously, to communicate with your team, is using the Solavei community. Okay, so that's the idea behind the communication plan worksheet. I hope that you'll use this. Get in the habit of using this. This, again, can be a nice part of your weekly planning process. Not that you're necessarily planning and putting in times of when you're going to call someone, but what I want you to do is then next week, so in the second week, of course, in the first week that you're using the system, you filled out your 7-day success plan. Let's wrap it up before I come back to the summarize. So we talked about calling prospects and messaging prospects. This is prospecting, okay? That's step 1, warm them up, right? Step 3 is follow up after you've gotten the message, which is step 2. Following up with prospects, calling your team, messaging your team. The next category is Solavei training. Solavei training. Well, I mean, let's face it, it's a default. You can plan on, it rarely happens, once in a while it happens with reschedules, but you can plan on Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 6 p. to 7 p. And again, that'd be Pacific, is our weekly team webinar. Last category here, personal development. I'm going to talk about personal development as a part of the 9-week Fast Start program. It's critically important that you have personal development time, sharpening the saw, making yourself better. And I broke that out aside from Solavei training, and we'll talk about personal development more here in a few minutes. All right, so the next week when you sit down to do this, again, I like doing this ahead of time before the week starts. For me, Saturday night works really well. Next week, when you sit down, if you're using my system, which is Saturday night, the first thing you look at is last week's worksheet. and you hold yourself accountable. You know, you're here. For me, it works really well to do it on Saturday because I want to end my week on Saturday. So how did I do with my preparations and planning ahead of time? How did I do, whether it's time or whether it in terms of number of hours, or was my goal number of touches, maybe number of calls. Maybe your goal for Monday calling prospects, maybe your goal is to call 12 prospects. And is that your goal every day? Let's say Wednesday's a tough day for you, so you really only are going to put down 3 prospects for Wednesday, and then 12, and then 12, and then 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 12 is 63. So your goal is 63. And as you tick, 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 counting them up, and as you get through here, let's say you are only at 50, but your goal is 63. So guess what you're going to do for Sunday? You got 13 to make up. So that's how I use, that's my goal, is I use Sunday kind of as that buffer. All right. Okay, so the first thing you do then the next week is you go over how did I do with last week's plan. Was it, what about it worked? What about it didn't work? What times didn't work? What times would work better? And you really kind of do an accounting of what worked for you. You also then take a look at your communication plan worksheet and how did that work out for you. You'll look here, however many number of names. Do you have 8 names? Do you have 20 names? Do you have 4 names? And who did you communicate with through the week? Who did you not communicate with through the week? And so you see some deficiencies there that then will help you as you come up here planning out your new week. If this is really full, then guess what? You did a great job here with calling the team and messaging the team. If it's not very full, then you need to maybe schedule a little more time to do that.